I think you have already noticed that by the presentation and the first materials that we covered, this is not going to be a course about your typical and stereotypical adulterated vision of Italians in America. This is not going to be about the tradition of pizza making, Sunday gravy, which is what they call tomato sauce, and large families, chubby Italian mothers, mandolin, and opera. This is not what the course is about. It is about the process of immigration of an ethnic group, and it's an experience that is shared by many, if not all, the groups of people who came to this country and became assimilated and integrated into the country. It is not, we don't look at it on an individual basis, because if we were to look at individuals, we would find so many individual circumstances, then we would lose sight of the collective experience. And so, using the traditional methods of academic analysis, social sciences, history, and so forth, psychology, we are going to look at a collective experience. Now, we can start from the premise that, yes, we all are immigrants. I am an immigrant. I came when I was 21 years old. I was an educated person, and I continued and I pursued higher education in America. Many of you are immigrants. Many of you are children of immigrants. Many more are grandchildren of immigrants. And certainly a lot of you have roots outside of this country. Now, aside from Native Americans, Indians, as they call themselves, everybody else is an immigrant. One major exception is the experience of African Americans. They did not volunteer to come to the country. They were brought by force in the conditions that we all know. Thus, it might seem that the discourse of immigration and integration and so forth would automatically exclude such a significant portion of not simply the student body, but just America in general. But that is not the case, because in my research I found something very interesting, that within the African American community there is the consciousness of what is called the Great Migration. The Great Migration is the process of migration from the southern states toward the northern industrial states. It started in the 30s, so approximately 70 years after the end of slavery and the end of the Civil War, and it continued until full industrialization was achieved in the 60s approximately. This mass migration is very similar culturally to internal mass migration, is very similar culturally to the migration of large groups of people who shared a language, ethnic identity, experience, social structure to this country. Most of the African Americans who came from the South came from the rural South. They were working in the fields. Most of them, if they were working at all, and we know what kind of conditions of deprivation and oppression they were living in apartheid, those people were at most sharecroppers, very, very poor farmers. They found their way north with the process of industrialization that was pushed and accelerated by World War II, which started in 1939 in Germany, and which the United States joined in 1941. But the process of industrialization had started earlier, and with the mobilization of a very large army, a lot of workers, able-bodied young men, became engaged in the war, opening up a lot of jobs in factories, primarily for the war effort. And these jobs were filled by African Americans coming from the South. They also escaped, as I said, conditions of social isolation and social oppression. And the cultural experience of leaving the only place that they knew, historically and collectively, and move to another country, literally, although with the same language more or less, was very similar to what other populations had experienced. And I'm going to share with you two things. One is a radio show with a professor, author of a book about the Great Migration, and also an exhibit by an extraordinary artist that closed last fall at the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York, that represents in 40 rather small paintings, moments, vignettes, experiences of African Americans leaving their native areas and moving up north. And in fact, I'm going to put a pause here so that I can include those two elements.